We're looking at some of the great examples of faith as we heard in the book of the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 11. And one of the persons that we heard of was Abraham, who is considered to be our father of faith. And so what are the promises that are given to Abraham? He'll be a great nation. He'll be a personal blessing. He will be great and have a famous name. He'll be a blessing to others. He will be a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. So let's take a look at who Abraham was. What was he like? We know from Genesis chapter 13, verse 2, that his name was first Abram. And he was very rich. He had lots of cattle, lots of silver, lots of gold. So he was a very wealthy man. Interesting that he would go from Ur all the way to where God was leading him, and he didn't even know where he was being led. And we hear in Genesis chapter 15, verse 1, God says to Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. So think of that shield, something that protects him, protects the vital part of his body, and he will be a shield in all difficult circumstances. And we hear later on, each interaction with Abram is very interesting. We understand more and more about this relationship between God and Abram. Genesis chapter 15, verses 5 and 6 and following. The Lord brought Abram outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars if you are able to number them. So shall your descendants be. We've all had the experience going out in a starry night, and you can't even count the number of stars. There's so many. And Abram had a difficulty. He was advanced in age. His wife was advanced in age. He had no descendants, no children. And God is saying, your descendants will be as numerous as the stars. What a paradox for him to live. How can that be? However, this is what we hear. Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord reckoned it to him as righteousness. We hear this in Habakkuk. We hear this also repeated in St. Paul's letter to the Galatians. That was considered righteousness, Abraham's believing in the Lord. The Lord said to Abram, I am the Lord who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. And we know that on that day, God made a covenant with Abram. Then let's go on to chapter 17. Very beautiful, this part. The Lord said to Abram, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. So there's that act of adoration, falling his face down to the ground. I am God Almighty, El Shaddai, one of the words that we have for referring to God. And there's this covenant, again, that is reaffirmed between Abram and God. And so what is this covenant going to have that's particularly interesting? No longer shall you be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generation for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your descendants after you. So here's a covenant where there's a change of name. So let's look at that change of name. It's going to happen to Sarah as well. What does Abram mean? If we look at the word, the etymology of the Hebrew, Ab, we know that means Abba, father. And Ram, that means exalted. So Abram means exalted father. When we put Abraham, that means father of a multitude. And then we hear with regard to Sarah, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Let's look at Sarah. Sar is the masculine name for prince or ruler. Sarah is the feminine version, meaning princess. So when we say Sarai, that means my princess, like Abram's princess. Sarah means the princess. So both of these name changes, according to Dr. Eli Lizorkin, Eisenberg, and Reverend Jim Stowe, that indicates a change of vocation. No longer are they walking for their own path of holiness. They're walking as on a path of holiness for a multitude of nations. And we can take inspiration from Abraham and Sarah's path of faith. Let us ask to base our faith completely on the faith of God who promises, God who engages with us in an everlasting covenant. God bless you, and we'll talk to you the next time.